Welcome to Mind Over Matter, where real stories of resilience become lessons in transformation. Tonight's guest is Dr. Brett Cordis, a former physician and surgeon whose career and life were almost derailed by addiction to prescription opioids. After years of intense personal recovery and a return to clinical medicine, Brett discovered a new calling, helping other doctors navigate the hidden crisis of burnout. His journey from devastation to service is a testament to the power of vulnerability, courage, and reinvention. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ware. It's an honor to have you.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Brett, your journey is incredibly powerful. When your addiction became public, what was the hardest part of facing that moment? And what shifted inside you during recovery?
Uh, well, that's an insightful question. The first thing that came to mind when my addiction was made public was what effect it might have on my family, but my kids in particular, because I take full ownership, I take full responsibility for the actions and behaviors that I did during my addiction. But my kids don't have anything to do with that. So I was really worried at the outset um, about how my kids would react, how my colleagues would treat my family, how our friends would treat us. So my first reaction was to protect my kids. Yeah. I would say that I kind of fostered my relationship with God and my higher power, but more accurately, I became more mindful and more conscious about myself and how I deal with the outside world on a daily basis. And most importantly, I really learned to try to live in the present moment. Instead of worrying about the future, or instead of mulling over and stressing out about what happened in the past, because we can't, or at least I can't change the past or the future. So trying to remain present in the current times, um, and enjoying every day as they come. That's probably been the biggest shift with me during recovery. It's helped me, stay sober, and it's helped me stay happy as well.
Absolutely. And that's amazing. Was there a pattern you saw again and again among your peers that called you to this work?
Uh, yes. Well, just to speak about some, mundane facts and statistics. Almost 60% of physicians qualify as being burned out. And what does burnout mean? The symptoms of burnout include feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling irritable or angry, um, and feeling that your work is not appreciated. And so, upwards of 60% of all physicians across the board qualify as being burned out, and it's higher for different specialties and lower for different specialties. But yes, I noticed amongst my peers, what I noticed is that the joy of our work has seemed to disappear. I heard someone say the other day that the difference between working a lot and being burned out is joy. If you're working a lot, but you still are experiencing joy when you go to work, then that's one thing. But if you're working a lot and you're not extracting any joy at all out of life and out of your profession, well, then you might be burned out. So I noticed amongst my peers that people were demonstrating symptoms of burnout, meaning they just seemed angry and irritable, kind of the grumpy old man adage seem to be cropping up quite a bit. So yeah, there's definitely a need to help physicians and doctors and professionals alike. It's not limited to the healthcare field, but there's a need to help people navigate burnout so that they can kind of reinvent themselves and find the passion that they used to have, for this profession, because typically people dedicate a large proportion of their lives training and studying, um, to become an expert in whatever field they choose, and it's a shame when people lose their passion for that work.
Absolutely. That realization that healing others sometimes means first healing ourselves is so profound.
Yes, it's hard, and again, I'll speak about my own experience, but um, I can't really fully invest in helping others unless I've already helped myself. I can only make a patient as well as I am myself. Kind of like on an airplane when they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on before you help others put their oxygen mask on. You have to be healthy yourself before you try, or at least I have to be healthy myself before I try to help others become healthy. And that's particularly the case in the work I'm doing now with burnout. I don't think I would be a very effective coach if I was burned out myself trying to coach others out of their burnout. So absolutely, I think a person needs to take care of themselves first, and then that way they're in a better position to help others.
Yeah, definitely. So, was there a moment you realized this wasn't just about surviving, but about creating a new life?
Yes. Um, you're talking about in recovery from addiction?
Yeah,
Yes, I realized that exact thing when I when it became obvious that recovery was not a goal. There isn't a start, a beginning, and a middle, and an end to recovery. There is no winning or losing in recovery. It's a journey. It's a journey that does not end. I'm going to be a drug addict in recovery until I die. Whether I use again or not. So it had to become a lifestyle, um, if it was never going to end. And so when I realized that surviving wasn't, that's just the bare minimum. Sometimes in recovery we hear that, not drinking or not using drugs, that's really just the bare minimum. What's important is to learn how to deal with life on life's terms, and ultimately how to be happy, how to extract joy out of life while also being sober. Um, and that's an entire lifestyle switch for me. It's almost like adopting a new personality. Survivorship is just the beginning, and it's the nuts and bolts of recovery. But you know, the real stuff, as they say, is found in, um, being happy as well.
that vulnerability, that healing begins at the moment of brutal honesty, is deeply moving.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Got to be honest with yourself and others, if you expect to live a successful and happy recovery journey.
Absolutely. So, burnout in healthcare is often hidden or stigmatized. What are some early signs that someone, especially in high achievers, should not ignore?
That's a great question. I will tell you the very first sign of my own burnout, and I'm just going to speak briefly about my story. I'm a physician and surgeon, as you said. I'm retired from clinical medicine, but I'm still a physician and surgeon. And I trained and went to school and studied to become a physician and surgeon for 13 years after high school. So I was 32 years old before I ever was working and functioning as a physician and surgeon. And so a great majority of my life, by the time I was 37, 38, and I had been working for 5 or 6 years, had been spent training. So after 5 or 6 years of working, I felt like almost like I was bored. And now in retrospect, I can look back and I can say and I can tell you that what I was really feeling was a lack of fulfillment, but it felt like boredom. And that is a very, very early sign of burnout. Feeling unfulfilled or feeling bored with your work. And that's really a symptom that is not, that I have not seen uh, in many other places. And it's definitely not a symptom that's talked about very much. So if there are any listeners, any professionals, anyone out there at all that feels like they're just bored at work, that can be an early sign of burnout. Other signs include finding yourself feeling frustrated often, or angry, or irritable, um, in any of a number of negative emotions while you're at work. But in particular, if those emotions follow you home. So when you have a bad day at the office, but then you go home and you allow that to create a bad day at home. That's mixing home life and personal life with your professional life. Is That's not really an early sign. That's a middle or even a late sign of burnout. But great question. Thank you for asking it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So, how can doctors or professionals begin to ask for help without feeling like they're failing?
Yeah, well, that's the key. I wish I could give you a concise answer. Um, there's two issues here. One is, where do they turn? Where do they find help? And another is, how do you entice a physician or a professional to ask for help? Because you're absolutely correct. The We have been kind of almost brainwashed during our training into thinking that, you know, the patient comes first, which is correct, but the patient doesn't come before your own health and well-being. That's kind of like what we discussed prior to this, which is to make sure that I am well so that I can treat patients and or clients. Um, and no one, no physician or surgeon or no professional in general is expected to work when they're sick. And um, and we are taught that to stay at home, even if you just are sick or have a cold or the flu, to stay at home for that is a form of failure. And so you can imagine what it feels like when you're essentially admitting to yourself and to others that not only am I sick, but I'm having a mental health crisis here, and I need help getting out of this mental health crisis, and I'm not going to be able to work until that's done. That's very It's difficult to admit to yourself, much less other people. But and that's why that first step is so courageous, because it takes a fair amount of self-awareness and courage to be able to approach a colleague or a boss or even a trusted friend, to admit that burnout is an issue, and I'm going to need help getting around it. In terms of where to find help, um, it's difficult because typically mental health professionals such as psychiatrists and psychologists, they're not really trained to help and or to treat someone who's suffering symptoms of burnout, because it's not just about anxiety, it's not just about depression. Those things can coexist. Don't get me wrong. Someone can qualify as being having generalized anxiety disorder or major depression, and also be suffering symptoms of burnout. But in general, the traditional psychologist and or psychiatrist is not well equipped to treat burnout. Coaches, on the other hand, this is really just a situation that's come about in the last 5 or 6 years. And I am a physician and surgeon. I'm not working anymore, but I'm also a coach. So to find me, for example, my website is theburnoutdoc.com. Um, Other ways are just to simply Google, mental health burnout treatment or mental health burnout um, help or whatnot. But um, a quick and easy way is just to remember to contact me via my website, which is theburnoutdoc.com. And I'm available all over the world. Obviously, all of my interviews are conducted via Zoom. So that's one way you can find help.
That's amazing. And that seeking help is an act of strength, not weakness, is vital to share.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
So, you speak from real, lived experience. How does that authenticity impact the way you coach and connect with your clients today?
Uh, Boy, another good another good question. Well, first of all, when I think, and certainly when I talk to others about what it means to be a genuine person or what it means to be an authentic person, essentially, I'm 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 just being myself. I'm living my own truth. I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not pretending to be someone else, or I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. And I think that that really just comes through automatically when you're interviewing someone or when you're speaking with someone. We as humans can we just get a sense when someone is not being genuine and authentic. And I will tell you, you know, physicians certainly, but I think a lot of professionals in general, um, we're not a group that likes to ask for help, because like you said earlier, we feel like we're failing if we have to ask for help. And so if you're going to have to ask for help, if you're going to have to exercise some courage in doing that, then you're going to need to trust the person that you're working with. And trust can really only be built when a relationship is kind of founded on authenticity and genuineness. So the fact that I've lived through substance abuse, the fact that I've lived through trouble with my marriage and all the symptoms of burnout, I think comes out in the interview, because I can talk about not just what I've learned professionally, and through becoming certified as a coach, but I can tap into my own lived experience, and that's a form of authenticity that's hard to fake. You know, Great question.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, have you seen breakthroughs happen simply because someone felt seen and understood by you?
Yeah, I can tell you, certainly in the recovery world, um, and I'll speak about that, but it also holds true in the world of burnout, or what we're really talking about is mental health in general. You know, have I seen the light bulb come on, for example, or have I seen someone someone's demeanor change for the positive, no matter what kind of mental health crisis they're having? And the answer is yes. And I'll speak specifically about recovery. There's just in the 12 step programs, but there's just something about listening and hearing another person describe their struggles and identifying with those struggles that is incredibly powerful. And that's what they're doing. You're realizing, gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that has, these thoughts of failure, or these or imposter syndrome, or thinking that I'm not good enough, or thinking that I'm not going to make it. When you hear someone else describe those feelings about themselves, there's a connection that is almost illogically powerful. And so I've seen that a number of times, when people are speaking with me or talking with me and they learn that the same struggles that they're having currently, I was having 4, 5, 6 years ago. And it's particularly poignant when they learn that they can again become happy. They can again um, find that passion that they used to have driving their professional life. So, yes, I've seen it. My lived experience, I think, is the single most valuable aspect of my coaching.
That's amazing. That shared humanity is the starting point for real healing. Is so encouraging.
Yes, I agree.
So, for listeners who are silently struggling, whether with burnout, addiction, or simply feeling lost, what's one thing you would urge them to do today?
Hmm, that's a great question. Um, I think I'll give you two things. One very, very practical piece of advice, and then another more general piece of advice. First thing I would advise someone who's feeling lost, um, whether it be with drugs and alcohol or burnout or depression. First thing I would advise is for them to do the next right thing. So, in the next 5 minutes, what would be the right thing? And it can be something as mundane as make your bed or take a shower or eat breakfast. Because when we're really struggling from a mental health standpoint, those small tasks can feel overwhelming. And when you just do the next right thing, eat breakfast, make your bed, that's something that you can accomplish. That is a goal that has a middle, beginning, and end, unlike recovery in general. And I've always felt better once I accomplish a goal. So doing the next right thing is my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice would be to try to help others that are in your circumstance. So, if you're a drug addict or an alcoholic, um, one of the best things to do when you're kind of trapped in your own head is to help another drug addict or alcoholic. If you're a burned out physician or a burned out professional, maybe you talk to a colleague who you suspect also is having the same struggles and tell them that they're not alone, you know. So bettering the lives of other people who are in similar circumstances, always a great idea to get oneself out of being stuck.
Mhm, absolutely. And that reminder that even a small act of reaching out can change the entire trajectory of life is incredibly hopeful.
Yes, I agree.
The Dr. Brett Cordis reminds us that rock bottom isn't the end. It's often the beginning of a life more honest, more aligned, and more free. Healing is not just possible, it's within reach when we allow ourselves to be seen, supported, and reimagined. So here's your invitation: let your struggle become your strength, and let your next step be the beginning of your own extraordinary transformation.